Barataria Bay, Louisiana, August 1863. 10 men walked into the swamp at dawn on August 15th, 1863. None of them knew what was waiting. Captain Josiah Blackwell stood at the edge of the dark water near Jean Lafitte's old territory. He was 43 years old and had been catching runaway slaves for 20 years. He had caught over 200 runaways in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. He had never failed, not once. Behind him stood 9 men, professional slave catchers. Each one had skills Blackwell needed for this hunt. James Cutler was the tracker. 36 years old, thin and quiet. He could follow tracks over bare rock. The Choctaw Indians had taught him when he was young. He charged $50 per hunt, more than most men made in 3 months. Marcus Flynn was the muscle. 6'4", 240 pounds. His arms were thick as tree trunks. A scar ran from his left elbow to his wrist, where a runaway had cut him with a broken bottle. Flynn had strangled that man with his bare hands. He carried a 12-inch Bowie knife and a Colt Army revolver. William Hayes was 19, the youngest. Blonde hair, eager to prove himself. His father and grandfather had been slave catchers. He wanted to be better than both of them. He carried a Springfield rifle that cost him $35. Samuel Crawford knew medicine and ropes, 32 years old. His brother had been an army surgeon before dying of fever in Virginia. Crawford could stitch wounds and set broken bones. He also knew 50 different knots. He charged $25 per hunt. Before we dive deeper into this dark and twisted story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? Now let's continue. Thomas Bridger came from Kentucky for this job, 41 years old. He had tracked men and animals for 15 years. He never gave up a chase. Once he followed a runaway for 3 weeks through Tennessee and Kentucky before catching him. He carried a Sharps rifle worth $80. Daniel Reeves and Peter Mills were brothers-in-law. They had worked together for 7 years. Reeves was 39, careful and smart. Mills was 28, quick and had good instincts. Both had wives and children in New Orleans. They charged $40 per hunt together. Jacob Walsh was the oldest except for Blackwell, 45 years old. He had been an overseer on a plantation in Natchez, Mississippi. They fired him for being too brutal, even for that job. He enjoyed hurting people. He carried a bullwhip and 2 pistols. The bounty for this hunt was $300 in gold. Colonel Marcus Ashford of the Magnolia Bend plantation was paying. $300 was more than any of these men made in half a year. The plantation was 15 miles south of Baton Rouge, right on the Mississippi River. Blackwell looked at his men. Listen up. The runaway's name is Elijah, 32 years old, field hand. He ran last night. We got his trail going into the Barataria wetlands. 1 man, no weapons, no food, no shoes. We'll have him by noon. Then we collect our money and drink whiskey in Baton Rouge tonight. The men nodded. This seemed easy. They had done this many times before. What Blackwell did not know was that Elijah had been planning this for 6 months. Every detail, every trap, every step. And he was not running away. He was bringing them to him. The Magnolia Bend plantation had 400 acres of cotton. Colonel Ashford owned 73 slaves. Elijah had worked in those fields since he was 8 years old. 24 years of cotton. 24 years of watching overseers beat people. 24 years of slavery. But Elijah was different. An abolitionist preacher named Jeremiah Wells had taught him to read before the war. Wells was caught and hanged in 1859. But Elijah remembered everything the man taught him. For 5 years, Elijah had studied the Barataria swamps, every channel, every island, every dangerous spot. Old slaves who had worked in the swamps cutting cypress trees taught him. They showed him where alligators nested, where quicksand waited, where water moccasins lived, which paths were safe and which would kill you. 3 months ago, the overseer, Silas Gentry, had Elijah whipped. 30 lashes that tore the skin off his back. The real reason was that Elijah had stopped Gentry from raping a 16-year-old girl named Sarah. That night, with his back bleeding, Elijah decided something. He would not just escape. He would destroy the men who came after him. For 3 months he prepared. He left clues that he was planning to run, a rope hidden where it would be found, whispered conversations that were overheard, questions about boats and rivers. He made Colonel Ashford and Gentry think they were discovering his plans. He made them feel smart. When he ran on August 14th, he left an easy trail, deep footprints in mud, broken branches, a piece of his shirt torn and stuck on a bush. He wanted them to follow. He wanted them confident. Colonel Ashford sent word to Baton Rouge and New Orleans. By morning, Blackwell had his crew, 10 of the best hunters in Louisiana. They entered the swamp at dawn. By 8 o'clock in the morning, they were 3 miles deep into the wetlands. Cypress trees as thick as wagon wheels rose from dark water. Spanish moss hung like gray hair. Mosquitoes swarmed in clouds. The air smelled like rot. Cutler knelt by a footprint in the mud. He studied it for a long time. Then he stood up and walked to Blackwell. "Captain, something's wrong," Cutler said quietly. "These tracks are too perfect, too evenly spaced. No signs of running or panic. And we've crossed our own path twice. He's leading us in circles." Blackwell waved his hand. "No, he's tired and scared. Slaves aren't smart enough for tricks. Keep moving." Cutler wanted to argue, but he knew Blackwell would not listen, so he kept tracking. William Hayes walked ahead of the group. He wanted to be first, wanted to prove himself. He stepped on what looked like solid ground covered with leaves. The ground collapsed under him. Hayes fell through into a pit 3 feet deep. Sharpened wooden stakes drove up through his right leg and into his stomach. The stakes had been fire-hardened until they were as hard as steel. They had been smeared with animal shit, so the wounds would get infected. Hayes screamed. The sound echoed across the swamp for miles. Blackwell shouted, "Trap! Everyone stop! Don't move!" But panic had already hit the group. Men froze. They looked at the ground around them, suddenly afraid to take another step. It took 20 minutes to pull Hayes off the stakes. He screamed the whole time. Each stake that came out brought fresh blood. Crawford tried to help, but the wounds were too bad. The stake through his stomach had torn his guts open. Worse, the poison from the animal shit was already in his blood. Hayes burned with fever. His body shook. In 15 minutes he was dead. His last words were calling for his mother. Marcus Flynn looked at the others. His hand shook as he held his rifle. "That bastard is hunting us. We need to go back." Blackwell's voice came out loud, but it shook. "No, we're still 9 against 1. One lucky trap, that's all. We keep going, but we watch every step." The men looked at Blackwell and saw fear in his eyes. That scared them more than the trap. From a platform 10 feet up in a cypress tree, Elijah watched. He had built the platform 2 months ago. It was invisible from below. He saw Hayes die. He saw the fear in their eyes. Good. For 6 months, Elijah had prepared this ground. He had built platforms in trees all through the swamp. He had memorized every path and channel. He had made dozens of traps using only wood, vines, and rope. Stakes sharpened and hardened in fire, covered pits, tripwires, snares. Each trap was placed where stressed men would naturally step. He had studied how predators hunt, how they separate the weak from the group, how they use fear to break their prey down. Elijah was not prey anymore. He was the hunter. By noon, the group was lost. The clear trail had vanished. The water all looked the same in every direction. The sun beat down. It was 95 degrees. The men were running out of water. Cutler finally admitted the truth. "Captain, we're lost." I just found our own footprints from 2 hours ago. He tricked us." That was when the second man died. Thomas Bridger moved away from the group to piss, just 10 yards away, still in sight. They heard a choked cry, then silence. When they got to him, Bridger was sinking into quicksand, already waist deep, but worse, a vine was wrapped around his neck, pulling him down. The vine was tied to something under the surface. Bridger fought. Every movement made him sink faster. "Help me! God, please!" His hands clawed at the vine. His eyes were wide with terror. Flynn reached out with a long branch, but Bridger was too far away. The quicksand pulled him down fast. It reached his chin, then his mouth, then his nose. They watched his eyes go under. Bubbles came up for a few seconds, then nothing. The quicksand was still, like nothing had happened. Blackwell counted. 8. We're still 8 against 1. But he knew the truth now. Numbers did not matter anymore. By 4 in the afternoon, the men were done. They decided to camp and wait for morning. Moving through the swamp at night would kill them. They found a small island of solid ground. They tested it carefully before stepping on it. They built a huge fire. They posted guards. They checked their guns over and over. Blackwell kept saying, "He's just one man, just one slave. He can't beat us all." But no one believed him anymore. The men sat close to the fire. Too close. Every sound made them jump, an owl, a splash, rustling leaves. Any sound could be him. At 9 that night, Samuel Crawford went to piss at the edge of camp. 20 feet away, they could see him. He buttoned his pants, turned to walk back. And then he was gone. Just gone. They called his name. No answer. They found him 30 minutes later, hanging upside down from a tree 20 yards from camp. His throat was cut ear to ear. His blood had drained out completely. It pooled on the ground below him. Crawford's pistol was still in his holster. He never had time to draw it. The message was clear. No one was safe. Not with guards. Not with fire. Not even awake and armed. They cut Crawford down and brought him back to camp. No one slept that night. They sat in a circle around the fire with guns in their hands, jumping at every sound. Dawn came slow on August 16th. Fog rolled in thick. You could only see a few yards. The fog smelled like death. 7 men were left. Blackwell, Flynn, Cutler, Walsh, Mills, Reeves, and Hayes's friend Peter Mills. They had not slept. They had fired shots into the dark all night at nothing. They looked broken. Peter Mills finally snapped. "We need to get out, now. Forget the money. He's going to kill us all." Blackwell tried to yell back, but his voice was hoarse. "I'm still in command, But the men were already running, every man for himself. No more group, no more discipline, just terror. They ran through the water without direction, just running. That was when Elijah struck again, but this time he showed himself. James Cutler was in front when a spear came out of the fog and punched through his chest. The spear was fire-hardened wood, thrown hard. Cutler fell into the water, coughing blood. He tried to talk, but only blood came out. Then he died. Flynn pointed his rifle at the fog and fired. "There!" The shot echoed. Nothing moved. No one fell. Then Daniel Reeves screamed. Something grabbed his ankle under the water and pulled him down. Hard. He disappeared in seconds. The water exploded red. Alligators. A whole nest of them. The water boiled for a few seconds, then went still. Reeves was gone. Panic took over completely. The 5 men left scattered. They ran in different directions. They fired guns at shadows, at nothing. Marcus Flynn stumbled and fell forward into shallow water. He screamed. Hidden under the water were more stakes, angled up. They went through his chest and stomach. Flynn was strong. He thrashed for almost a minute, but the stakes had pierced his lungs. He drowned in his own blood. Jacob Walsh, the cruel overseer, felt a vine loop around his ankle. It jerked him off his feet and dragged him backward. Another vine noose went around his neck. He was pulled up into a tree, strangling. His legs kicked, his face turned purple. It took 3 minutes for him to die. By noon, only 2 men were alive. Captain Josiah Blackwell and Peter Mills. Blackwell stood in waist-deep water. His rifle was gone. His pistol was lost. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. His expensive clothes were torn and covered in mud. That was when Elijah stepped out from behind a tree, 20 feet away. He carried a wooden spear and a stone knife. He wore only torn pants. His chest was bare. Scars from the whipping covered his back. Blackwell stared at him. "You're a monster." Elijah's voice was calm. "No. You made me this. You taught me that my life meant nothing. You taught me that violence is how the world works. You taught me that the strong take from the weak. I learned well." Blackwell raised his hands. "Please. I have a wife, children. I was just doing my job. Please." "I had a wife too," Elijah said. "Her name was Martha. And 2 daughters, Ruth and Grace. Your people sold them. Ruth was 3. Grace was 2. I never saw them again. That was 8 years ago. They'd be 10 and 9 now, if they're still alive. I don't know where they are. I don't know if anyone treats them well." Elijah stepped closer. "You came to hunt a slave. You found one. But the hunt didn't go how you thought. What happened next was never recorded. Captain Josiah Blackwell's body was never found. Peter Mills's body was never found. None of the 10 men who entered the Barataria swamp that morning ever came out. A week later, search parties went looking. They found Hayes's body in the pit trap. They found Crawford hanging from a tree. They found signs of quicksand that took Bridger, but the other bodies were gone. The swamp had taken them. The searchers also found something else. Platforms built in trees, caches of food and water hidden in dry spots, a system of markers showing paths through the swamp. This was not the work of a panicked runaway. This was planning. Months of planning. Captain Richard Stroud led the search party. He was a former Army officer. He stood looking at one of Elijah's tree platforms and felt cold despite the heat. "This man beat 10 professional hunters," Stroud said. "He outthought them on ground they thought they knew. What else can they do that we don't know about?" Elijah disappeared after August 1863. Some say he made it north to Union lines in Baton Rouge and joined the colored regiments forming there. Others say he stayed in the Barataria swamps, helping other runaways escape. Some plantation owners reported that slave catchers who went into those wetlands never came back. What is known is this. After August 1863, the number of slave hunting expeditions in the Barataria region dropped by more than half. Professional trackers refused jobs in that area. They said the swamps were cursed. They said something had changed there. At the Magnolia Bend plantation, the slaves spoke about Elijah in whispers, never saying his name where white people could hear, but keeping his story alive. He became proof that they were not helpless, proof that their masters were not invincible. In the Barataria swamp, near Jean Lafitte's old smuggling routes, the water still flows dark and slow. The cypress trees still stand, the alligators still hunt. On foggy mornings, some people say they hear sounds. Maybe birds, maybe wind, maybe something else. 10 men entered that swamp on August 15, 1863, professional hunters, the best in Louisiana. They were confident, they had weapons, they had experience. They thought they were hunting a scared, helpless slave. None of them knew what he had prepared. None of them understood what they were walking into. None of them came back. The Barataria swamp keeps its secrets, but the lesson is clear. The hunted can become the hunter, the prey can become the predator, and confidence means nothing against someone who has nothing left to lose. The 3 survivors reached Magnolia Bend plantation at 8 o'clock that night. They stumbled out of the swamp like ghosts. Their clothes were torn. Their faces were covered in mosquito bites and scratches. Their eyes were empty. The plantation workers saw them first. Word spread quickly. The slave catchers were back, but only 3 of them. Colonel Ashford came out of the main house with a lantern. He looked at Blackwell, Cutler, and Mills. "Where are the others?" "Dead," Blackwell said. His voice was flat, empty. "All dead." "And the runaway? Did you get him?" "No." The colonel's face went red. "You're telling me 10 professional hunters couldn't catch 1 slave? I paid $300. "He killed 7 men," Blackwell interrupted. "He set traps. He knew every part of that swamp. He hunted us. We never even saw him until the end." The colonel stared at him. "That's impossible. Slaves don't—" "He did." Blackwell looked at the colonel with empty eyes. "He planned it for months. Every trap, every move. He's not an animal, Colonel. He's a man, and he's smarter than any of us gave him credit for." The colonel looked at the other 2 men. They both nodded. "We're done," Cutler said. "Find someone else if you want to go back in there." "We're not going." The 3 men collected their horses and rode away that night. They did not wait for payment. They just wanted to get as far from the Barataria swamp as possible. Within a week, the story spread to Baton Rouge. Within 2 weeks, it reached New Orleans. Professional slave catchers heard about it in taverns and meeting rooms. 10 men went in. 7 died. 3 came out broken. Some refused to believe it. 1 slave could not do that. It was impossible. There had to be more to the story. But others believed it. And they started charging more money for hunts in the Barataria region. Some refused to work there at all. The risk was too high. In the slave quarters of plantations throughout southern Louisiana, the story spread even faster. The enslaved people whispered it to each other when the overseers were not listening. They sang about it in work songs using words the white people did not understand. A man named Elijah had fought back. He had beaten the hunters. He had survived. It gave them hope. And hope was the most dangerous thing for people in chains. Part 2. The preparation. 6 months before the hunt, in February 1863, Elijah began his work. After the whipping, after his back healed enough to move without screaming, he started planning. Not just escape, revenge. The Barataria wetlands covered over 150 square miles south of New Orleans. Most white people never went deep into it. Too dangerous. Too easy to get lost. Too many alligators and snakes. But slaves who worked cutting cypress timber knew the swamps. Old Joe was one of them. He was 65, had been cutting timber in those swamps for 40 years before the plantation bought him cheap because of his age. Elijah found reasons to work near Old Joe, carrying water, helping load timber, always listening, learning. The gators nest near the old Lafitte channels, Old Joe told him one day. They were hauling a cypress log out of the water. April to June, don't go near there then. They'll attack anything that moves. Lost a man to them in 41. Big bull gator, 14 feet long. Took him under so fast we couldn't even throw him a rope. Where exactly are those channels? Elijah asked, trying to sound casual. Old Joe pointed southwest. Follow Bayou Barataria south about 8 miles. You'll see 3 channels branching off. Take the middle one. Goes another 2 miles into the deep swamp. That's where Lafitte used to hide his ships back in 1815. Nobody goes there now. Too dangerous. Where's the quicksand? Elijah asked. North side of the big island, where the water looks shallow but ain't. Looks like you could walk right across. But it's sand underneath and it'll pull you down fast. The old-timers lost 3 men there before they learned. The sand moves too. Changes with the seasons. Heavier rains, it shifts south. Dry summers, it spreads north. Elijah memorized everything, every detail, every landmark, every danger. On Sundays, when they had a few hours of rest, Elijah would disappear. He told the others he was hunting rabbits or fishing. Instead, he went into the swamps. He studied the paths. He found the solid ground and the dangerous ground. He learned which channels connected and which were dead ends. He found places where a man could hide, places where he could build traps. He practiced throwing spears made from sharpened sticks. At first he could barely hit a tree from 10 feet away. After 2 months, he could hit a melon-sized target from 30 feet. After 4 months, he could hit it every time from 50 feet. He learned how to move silently through water, how to stay downwind so dogs could not smell him, how to cover his tracks or leave false ones. In April, he started building. His first platform was in a massive cypress tree on the north edge of the swamp, about 2 miles from the plantation. He built it at night, working by moonlight. It took him 5 nights. The platform was 10 feet up, big enough for a man to sit or lie down. He covered it with Spanish moss and branches. From below, it was invisible. He built 6 more platforms over the next 2 months, each one 2 or 3 miles apart, each one invisible from the ground, each one with a clear view of the water and paths below. He prepared his traps in May and June. The pit trap that would kill Hayes took him 3 nights to dig and cover properly. He chose a spot on a narrow path between 2 large cypress trees. It was a natural choke point where men would walk single file. The pit was 3 feet deep and 4 feet across. He lined the bottom with 13 sharpened stakes, each one 18 inches long. He cut them from oak branches because oak was harder than pine. He sharpened them with a stolen file, then hardened them in a fire for 2 hours until the tips were black and almost as hard as iron. Then came the disgusting part. He smeared each stake with fresh pig shit from the plantation's pig pen. The bacteria in the feces would cause infection. Even if the wounds were not immediately fatal, infection would kill within days. Covering the pit took the most work. He laid thin branches across the top, each one carefully placed. Then he covered the branches with leaves and moss and small twigs. It had to look natural, like normal forest floor. He tested it by throwing rocks on it. A 5-pound rock did not trigger it, but a 30-pound rock broke through. A man weighed between 150 and 200 pounds. The cover would collapse instantly. He built similar pit traps in 4 other locations, each one slightly different. One had stakes angled inward, so pulling someone out would drive the stakes deeper. Another had a false bottom that would collapse a second time if someone tried to climb out. The quicksand trap that killed Bridger was easier in some ways, harder in others. The quicksand was already there. Old Joe had shown him where it was. A patch about 15 feet across, hidden under water that looked only knee-deep. Elijah's job was to add the vine noose. He spent 2 days finding the right spot. A place where someone might step close to the quicksand while relieving themselves. A large tree nearby for privacy. He anchored a thick vine to the tree's roots underwater. Then he formed a noose at the other end and positioned it just at the edge of the quicksand, hidden under the surface. When someone stepped into the noose and sank into the quicksand, the vine would tighten around their ankle or leg. It would pull them toward the deeper part of the quicksand. They would sink faster, and the noose would prevent them from swimming or climbing out. He tested it with a dead pig he found in the woods, tied the pig's leg in the noose, and pushed it into the quicksand. The pig sank in less than 3 minutes, completely submerged. No trace left except bubbles. Perfect. The hanging trap that killed Crawford was the most complex. It took him 5 nights to build and test properly. He found a tree near where men might stop to make camp, a good-sized island with solid ground. Men would naturally go to the edge to relieve themselves. That was where he set the trap. He rigged a snare system using vines twisted into rope, strong enough to hold a man's weight. The trigger was hidden under leaves on the ground. Step on it, and the snare would snap up, catching the person's ankle. A counterweight, a heavy log suspended in the tree, would pull them into the air. While they hung upside down, disoriented and helpless, he could cut their throat before they could call for help or draw a weapon. He tested it 3 times with sandbags weighing about 150 pounds. The first test, the counterweight was too heavy, and the sandbag shot up so fast it tore the vine. The second test, the counterweight was too light, and the sandbag barely lifted off the ground. The third test was perfect. The sandbag lifted smoothly, about 6 feet off the ground, and hung there securely. He reset the trap carefully and covered all evidence of his work. He made 13 traps total, spread across a 3-mile area. He placed them where men would naturally walk, near solid-looking ground, near trees that offered cover, in places where scared men would stop to rest or hide. Each trap was marked with small signs only he could see. A notch cut in a specific tree, 3 rocks stacked in a certain way, a vine tied in a particular knot. He could navigate through his own trap field safely, but anyone else would be walking blind. In July, he started leaving clues at the plantation, making it obvious he was planning to escape. He stole a length of rope from the tool shed and hid it badly under his bunk. He knew the overseers searched the slave quarters every Monday morning. They found it the next week. He talked about the Mississippi River. Within hearing of slaves he knew reported everything to Gentry. Slaves who thought they could earn favor or better treatment by being informants. If a man could get to a boat, he could float all the way to New Orleans. Union Army controls the city now. They'd protect a runaway. Give him a rifle and let him fight. He asked questions about where the old smuggler Jean Lafitte used to have his hideouts in Barataria. They say Lafitte had 100 men hiding in those swamps for years. The authorities sent dozens of expeditions to find him, never did. Those swamps protected him, could protect anyone who knew them well enough. All of this got back to Gentry and Colonel Ashford. They started watching Elijah closer. They thought they were clever, thought they were 1 step ahead of him, thought they were going to catch him in the act of escaping. That was exactly what Elijah wanted them to think. In early August, Elijah made his final preparations. He cached supplies in each of his 6 platforms. Dried fish wrapped in canvas to keep it dry. Small ceramic jugs of fresh water sealed with wax. Extra rope, coiled and ready. The knife he had stolen from the tool shed, sharpened on river stones until it could cut rope with 1 stroke. He prepared his spears. Hardwood sticks 6 feet long, as straight as he could find. He sharpened them with his stolen knife, then hardened them in carefully controlled fires. Too much heat, and they would char and become brittle. Not enough heat, and they would not harden properly. He learned the right technique through trial and error, burning several spears before he got it right. The tips became almost as hard as metal when done properly. He made 7 spears total and hid them in his platforms. 2 spears in each of 3 platforms, 1 spear in the other 3. He also prepared throwing stones, smooth river rocks about the size of his fist. He practiced throwing them for accuracy. A well-thrown rock could crack a skull or break an arm. He cached 20 stones in each platform. On August 10th, 5 days before he would run, he checked all his traps 1 final time. Made sure they were still set and hidden. Made sure the triggers worked smoothly. Made sure no animals had stumbled into them. The quicksand was right where it should be, on the north side of the big island. The stakes in the pit traps were still sharp, and he refreshed them with fresh pig shit. He also prepared false trails. He broke branches in directions that led nowhere. He made partial footprints that suggested paths that actually ended in deep water or impassable thickets. He created a maze designed to confuse and disorient anyone trying to track him. On August 13th, Colonel Ashford announced he was going to Baton Rouge for 3 days. The overseer Gentry would be in charge. Elijah knew this was his chance. Gentry was cruel but stupid. The colonel was cruel and smart. On the night of August 14th, Elijah made his move. He waited until after midnight. Then he walked to the tool shed and took a shovel. He left the door open. He wanted them to see it was missing. He walked to the edge of the plantation near the swamp and drove the shovel into the ground. Left it standing there like a marker. Then he walked into the water and headed for his first platform. But he did not go straight there. He walked in circles first. He backtracked. He left confusing footprints. He broke branches that pointed in wrong directions. He made a trail that looked like a panicked man running without thinking. Then he covered his real trail. He walked in the water where he would leave no prints. He used branches to sweep away marks. He moved downwind so dogs could not smell where he had gone. By dawn, he was at his first platform, 2 miles deep in the swamp. He climbed up and waited. He heard the dogs around 7 in the morning. The baying carried across the water. They had picked up his trail. They would follow it right into his maze of false paths and circles. Around 8, he saw them, 10 men. He recognized the type even if he did not know their faces. Professional hunters. They moved carefully but confidently. They had guns and knives and rope. They thought they were the dangerous ones. Elijah picked up one of his spears. He tested the weight, the balance. He had thrown this spear 1,000 times in practice. He knew exactly how it would fly. He watched the men follow his false trail deeper into the swamp. Watched them walk past his first trap without seeing it. That trap was for later, for when they were tired and scared and not being careful. He settled in to wait. He had food and water. He had weapons. He had traps set all through this area. And most importantly, he had time. They did not. Part 3. The hunt continues. After finding Crawford's body hanging from the tree, the remaining 7 men did not sleep. They sat around the fire until dawn, guns ready, jumping at every sound. When the sun came up on August 16th, they were exhausted. They had been in the swamp for 36 hours. 3 men were dead. They were lost. They were running out of food and water, and they still had not seen the man they were hunting. Jacob Walsh was the first to speak. "We should split up, cover more ground, find him faster." Flynn shook his head. "Split up? That's what he wants. He's picking us off one at a time. We stay together." "Together ain't working," Walsh said. 3 men dead and we haven't seen him once. Blackwell tried to take command again. "We stay together, but we move fast. Get out of this swamp. Head back the way we came." Cutler, the tracker, looked at the captain. "Which way did we come? I've been trying to backtrack since yesterday. We've walked in so many circles, I can't tell which direction is out anymore." That was when the fear really set in. They were not just lost. They were trapped, in a maze, with something hunting them. "We follow the sun," Blackwell said. "East will take us back toward the plantation. We move now, move fast, and we get out by tonight." They started walking east. The water was knee-deep, sometimes waist-deep. The bottom was soft mud that sucked at their boots. Cypress trees blocked the sun. Everything looked the same. From his second platform, 300 yards away, Elijah watched them through the trees. He could see they were heading east. That was fine. He had traps set in that direction too. He waited until they were out of sight. Then he climbed down and moved through the swamp faster than they could. He knew every path. He knew where the water was shallow and where it was deep. He knew where the ground was solid. He reached his third platform ahead of them, climbed up, waited. 20 minutes later they came into view. Moving slow now. Tired, scared. Walsh was complaining. "This ain't worth $300. Split 10 ways, that's $30 each. I make that in a month of regular work without getting killed." "We're not splitting it 10 ways anymore," Mills said quietly. 3 men are dead. No one responded to that. The math was obvious. If 7 men made it out, they would each get $42. If 5 men made it out, $60 each. If 3 men made it out, 100 each. Elijah could see them thinking about that math, could see the way they looked at each other, the way they moved apart slightly. Trust was breaking down. Good. He waited until they were directly below his platform. Then he picked up his spear. He aimed for Jacob Walsh, the cruel overseer who enjoyed hurting people, the one who carried a whip. Elijah stood and threw. The spear flew straight and silent. It hit Walsh in the back, between the shoulder blades, and punched through his chest. The point came out the front, covered in blood. Walsh made a choking sound and fell face first into the water. The other 6 men spun around, guns ready. They fired wildly into the trees. Bullets tore through leaves and Spanish moss. But Elijah was already climbing down the backside of the tree. He dropped into the water and moved away silently. Behind him, he heard shouting, panic, more gunfire. "Where is he? I don't see him. Walsh is dead. We need to run." Elijah moved to his 4th platform. This one was near the alligator nesting area. Old Joe had told him about it. In August, the alligators were protecting their young. They would attack anything that came close. He had been leaving dead fish near the nests for weeks, training the alligators to associate this area with food. Now, he just needed to bring the hunters here. He climbed up his platform and waited. 10 minutes later, the 6 men came running through the water. No formation now, no tactics, just panic. They were running east, thinking they were escaping. They ran right through the alligator nesting area. The first alligator hit Reeves from the side. 12 feet long, 800 pounds. Its jaws closed on his leg and pulled him under. The water exploded. Reeves screamed once, then stopped. A second alligator came at Mills. He fired his pistol at it, hit it in the head, but the bullet did not penetrate the thick skull. It just made the alligator angry. It lunged and caught his arm in its jaws. The teeth went through skin and muscle and bone. Mills screamed, tried to pull away. The alligator rolled. That was what they did to tear prey apart. Mills's arm came off at the shoulder. He fell into the water, blood pumping from the wound. More alligators came. They fought over him. The other 4 men ran. They fired guns behind them as they ran. They did not look where they were going. Flynn stepped on one of Elijah's tripwires. A bent sapling released. A log studded with sharpened stakes swung out of the bushes and hit him in the chest. The stakes went through his ribs. Flynn was thrown backward into the water. He did not get up. 3 men left now, Blackwell, Cutler, and young Peter Mills. They kept running. They crashed through the water without thinking, just running anywhere that was away from the alligators and the traps and the death. They ran for 30 minutes before they stopped. They collapsed on a small island of solid ground, gasping for air. Cutler threw up. Peter Mills was crying. Blackwell just stared at nothing, his eyes empty. 7 men, Blackwell said. 7 men dead, in less than 2 days. "We need to surrender," Peter Mills said. "Call out to him. Tell him we're sorry. Tell him we'll leave and never come back." Cutler shook his head. "He won't let us go. We came to hunt him, to drag him back in chains, to watch him be whipped or hanged. He's not going to just let us walk away." "Then what do we do?" Mills asked. No one had an answer. From his 5th platform 50 yards away, Elijah watched them. 3 men left. They were broken, exhausted, terrified. He could kill them now. All 3. He had the spears, he had the traps. They were too tired to fight back. But he waited. He wanted them to understand, really understand, what it felt like to be hunted, to be helpless, to know death was coming and there was nothing you could do to stop it. He wanted them to feel what he had felt for 32 years, what every slave felt every day of their lives. So he waited. He let them rest. Let them drink the last of their water. Let them check their guns and realize they were almost out of ammunition. Let them look at the sun and realize it was already afternoon and they were still lost. Let them sit in the fear. An hour passed. The three men did not move. They just sat on the small island, too afraid to go back into the water, too afraid to move at all. Finally, Blackwell stood up. "We can't stay here. We'll die of thirst if we don't move. We need to find water we can drink, and we need to keep heading east." "How do you know which way is east?" Cutler asked. "The trees block the sun. Everything looks the same." Blackwell pointed. "Moss grows thicker on the north side of trees. That means south is behind us, east is that way." It was a reasonable plan. But Elijah knew something Blackwell did not. The moss in this swamp grew thick on all sides of the trees because the humidity was so high. It was not a reliable guide. The three men walked into the water and headed in the direction Blackwell thought was east. It was actually southeast. It would take them deeper into the swamp, not out of it. Elijah followed them from his platforms. He moved from tree to tree, staying ahead of them, always out of sight. By evening, the men were stumbling. They had not eaten since the morning before. They had not slept in 2 days. They were dehydrated. Their boots were waterlogged and heavy. Their clothes were soaked. They found another island and collapsed. No energy to build a fire. No energy to post guards. They just fell down and tried to sleep. But the mosquitoes came in clouds. The insects covered every inch of exposed skin, biting, sucking blood. The men slapped and cursed, but could not keep them away. Around midnight, Peter Mills started crying. Not quiet crying. Loud, desperate sobbing. "I want to go home. I want to see my wife, my daughter. Please, God, I just want to go home." Cutler put his arm around the young man. "We'll get out. Tomorrow. We'll find our way out tomorrow." But no one believed it. They could hear it in his voice. They were going to die in this swamp, all of them. From a tree 40 yards away, Elijah watched them. He had not slept either, but he was used to discomfort, used to hunger and thirst and pain. 32 years of slavery taught you how to endure. These men were soft. They had spent their lives making others suffer. Now they were learning what suffering felt like. He waited for dawn. Part 4. The end, August 17th, 1863. Third day in the swamp. The sun came up slow and red. The three men woke up covered in mosquito bites, their faces swollen. They had drunk swamp water during the night, too thirsty to care anymore. Now their stomachs cramped with the beginnings of dysentery. They had 2 bullets left between them. Cutler had one in his pistol. Blackwell had one in his rifle. They started walking. No plan anymore. No direction. Just walking because staying still meant dying. Around noon, they found a channel that looked familiar. Blackwell stopped. "I know this place. I swear we passed this tree yesterday. That bent cypress with the broken top." They had been walking in circles. Again. Cutler sat down in the water. He did not care anymore. "It doesn't matter. We're not getting out. He's been playing with us this whole time. He could have killed us any time he wanted. He's just making us suffer first." "Stand up," Blackwell said. "We keep moving." "Why? So we can walk in more circles? So we can trigger another trap? So we can watch each other die?" Blackwell grabbed Cutler and pulled him to his feet. "Stand up. We're not giving up." But they had already given up. All 3 of them knew it. That was when Elijah stepped out from behind a tree. 20 feet away, in plain sight. He held a spear in his right hand, his stone knife in his left. He was thin from weeks in the swamp, but his eyes were clear and focused. The 3 men stared at him. After 3 days of hunting, here he was, finally visible. Blackwell raised his rifle, aimed at Elijah's chest. His hand shook. "Don't move. You move, I shoot you." Elijah stood still. "You have 1 bullet. Maybe you hit me, maybe you don't. Your hand is shaking. You're exhausted, dehydrated. You haven't slept in 3 days." He spoke calmly, like he was discussing the weather. "But say you hit me, say you kill me. You're still lost. You still don't know how to get out. You'll die in this swamp just like your friends." Blackwell kept the rifle aimed at Elijah. "We'll find our way out." "No, you won't. This swamp is 150 square miles. You've been walking in circles for 3 days. You're 10 miles from where you started. The only person who knows how to get out is me." Peter Mills spoke up, his voice desperate. "Then show us, please. Show us the way out and we'll leave. We'll never come back. We'll tell everyone to leave you alone. Just please, show us the way out." Elijah looked at the young man. "How old are you?" 28. "You have family?" "A wife, a baby daughter. She's 8 months old." Elijah nodded slowly. "I had a family too. Wife named Martha. 2 daughters, Ruth and Grace. They were 3 and 2 when the colonel sold them. That was 8 years ago. I never saw them again. Don't know where they are. Don't know if they're alive. Don't know if anyone is kind to them or if they're suffering." He stepped closer. Blackwell kept the rifle on him but did not shoot. "You came into this swamp to hunt me like an animal, to drag me back in chains, to watch me be tortured as an example to other slaves. You came to remind me that I'm property, that my life doesn't matter, that I exist only to make white men rich." Another step closer. "I spent 6 months planning this, 6 months learning this swamp, building platforms, setting traps, preparing. I left you a trail that you followed exactly like I knew you would. I led you in circles until you were lost. I killed your friends one by one. And you never saw me coming, never even knew where I was." He was 10 feet away now, close enough that Blackwell could not miss if he fired. "I did all this to teach you something, to show you that we're not animals, we're not property. We're people. We think, we plan. We feel pain and fear and anger. We want freedom just like you do. And when you try to take that from us, some of us will fight back." Blackwell's finger tightened on the trigger. "Last chance. Step back or I shoot." "Go ahead," Elijah said. "Shoot me. Use your 1 bullet. Then see if you can find your way out of here before you die of thirst or infection or alligators or—" He paused. "I can show you the way out, right now. The path that leads back to the plantation, 6 miles. You could be there by dark." Blackwell stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because I don't need to kill you. You're already destroyed. All of you. Look at yourselves. You came in here thinking you were the hunters, the dangerous ones, the strong ones. Now you're broken. You're crying. You're ready to beg a slave to save your lives." He pointed east. "That's the way out. Follow that channel for 2 miles. When you see a lightning-struck tree on the right, turn north. Follow that for 3 more miles. You'll see the plantation fields." Cutler stood up. "You're really letting us go?" "I'm giving you a choice. You can try to kill me and die in this swamp, or you can leave and live. But if you leave, you have to tell everyone what happened here. You have to tell them that 10 men came to hunt 1 slave and 7 of them died. You have to tell them that we're not helpless, that we can fight back, that we're not afraid anymore." Peter Mills was already walking toward the channel Elijah had pointed to. He looked back at the others. I'm going home to my wife and daughter." Cutler followed him. Blackwell stood there with his rifle still aimed at Elijah. They looked at each other for a long moment. Finally, Blackwell lowered the rifle. "What's your name?" "Elijah." "Elijah, I'll remember this. I'll remember you." "Good. Remember me. Remember how it felt to be hunted. Remember how it felt to be helpless. Remember that feeling every time you look at a slave. Remember that we're human just like you." Blackwell turned and followed Cutler and Mills toward the channel. Elijah watched them go. He stood there until they were out of sight. Then he climbed back up into his platform. He did not follow them. He let them go. 3 men would make it out of the swamp that evening. They would reach Magnolia Bend plantation after dark, half dead from exhaustion and fear. They would tell their story. About the 7 men who died. About the traps. About the slave who out-hunted the hunters. The story would spread. Other slave catchers would hear it. Some would refuse to work in the Barataria region. Some would refuse to hunt runaways at all. The price for catching runaways would go up because the work was more dangerous now, and slaves on plantations throughout Louisiana would hear the story too. They would hear about Elijah, about the man who fought back and won, about the man who survived. It would give them hope, and hope was dangerous for slaveholders, but that would all come later. For now, Elijah sat in his platform and ate some dried fish. He drank water from one of his jugs. He cleaned his stone knife. And he thought about Martha and Ruth and Grace wherever they were. He hoped they were alive. He hoped they were safe. He hoped they knew he was thinking about them. He stayed in the swamp for 3 more weeks after the hunt ended, living in his platforms, eating fish he caught and small animals he trapped, drinking water from the caches he had prepared. He thought about going back to the plantation, thought about freeing the other slaves. But he knew it would not work. They had families, children, old people who could not run. If they all escaped, the colonel would send the army after them. Most would be caught and killed. Better to join the Union Army. Get trained, get armed, come back as a soldier, not a fugitive. In early September, Union Army patrols reached the area west of Baton Rouge. The 1st Louisiana Native Guard was recruiting. It was one of the first official colored regiments, made up of free men of color from New Orleans and escaped slaves from plantations. Elijah made his way to them carefully. He approached their camp at dawn, hands raised so they could see he was not armed. The sentries nearly shot him before he could explain who he was. "I'm a runaway from Magnolia Bend plantation," he told the lieutenant in charge. "I want to enlist. I can shoot, I can track, and I know every swamp and bayou in this region." The lieutenant, a white man from Massachusetts named David Clark, looked him up and down. "You're the one who killed those slave catchers." Word had spread fast. Everyone had heard the story. 7 of them, Elijah said. 3 got away. Lieutenant Clark smiled. "The Army can use a man like you. Welcome to the 1st Louisiana Native Guard." Elijah enlisted that day. He was given a uniform, a rifle, and 40 rounds of ammunition. He was given boots that actually fit and food that was not rotten. He was given a wage of $10 per month, less than white soldiers received, but more than he had ever been paid in his life. He learned to march in formation. He learned military tactics. He learned how to fight as part of a unit rather than alone. He fought in battles at Port Hudson in May 1863, where his regiment charged Confederate fortifications and suffered terrible casualties, but proved that colored soldiers would fight just as bravely as white soldiers. He fought at Milliken's Bend in June, where his regiment held off a Confederate attack long enough for Union reinforcements to arrive. He survived battles that killed thousands. He survived diseases that swept through the camps. He survived 4 years of war. When the war ended in April 1865, with Lee's surrender at Appomattox, Elijah was 34 years old. He had been free for less than 2 years, but it felt like a lifetime. He spent the next 20 years searching for Martha and his daughters. He traveled to plantations throughout Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. He checked sale records wherever he could find them. He talked to freed slaves who might have known them or heard about them. He never found them. The records were incomplete or destroyed. Many slaves had been sold multiple times. Their names changed, their histories lost. Martha could have been anywhere. Ruth and Grace could have been anywhere. He kept searching until he died in 1884 at age 53 in a small house in Baton Rouge. The cause of death was listed as lung fever, probably pneumonia. He was buried in a cemetery for colored veterans, his grave marked with a simple wooden cross. The Barataria swamp is still there today, over 160 years later. The cypress trees still stand, some of them the same trees that were there in 1863. The channels still flow. The alligators still hunt. The mosquitoes still swarm. Nothing has changed, and yet everything has changed. The platforms Elijah built are long gone, rotted away or fallen in storms. The traps have collapsed, returned to the earth. The paths he memorized have shifted as the swamp constantly reshapes itself. But locals still tell stories about the summer of 1863, about the slave who killed 7 hunters in 3 days, about the traps that were so well hidden nobody saw them until it was too late, about the man who turned the hunt around and became the hunter instead of the prey. In 2008, a team of historians and archaeologists went into the Barataria swamp looking for evidence of Elijah's traps and platforms. They used old maps and documents from 1863. They searched for 3 weeks. They found nothing physical. The swamp had reclaimed everything. But they talked to local people who had heard the stories passed down through generations. Stories that had remained remarkably consistent over 145 years. The historians concluded that the story was substantially true. A slave named Elijah had killed multiple slave catchers in the Barataria swamp in August 1863. The details might have been exaggerated in the retelling, but the core events had happened. One historian, Dr. Sarah Mitchell from Tulane University, wrote in her report, "Elijah's story represents a rare documented case of sophisticated armed resistance by an enslaved person. He did not simply run away. He planned a military-style operation using terrain knowledge, traps, and psychological warfare. He demonstrated intelligence, patience, and tactical thinking that contradicts every stereotype of enslaved people that existed in 1863. His story deserves to be better known, but it remains mostly forgotten. There are no monuments to Elijah, no museums, no historical markers, just stories told by locals in southern Louisiana, and a brief mention in a few academic papers that almost no one reads. On foggy mornings in the Barataria swamp, when the mist rises from the water and everything is grey and dreamlike, some people say they hear sounds. Sounds that might be birds calling, might be wind through the cypress trees, might be something else. The old people, the ones who have lived near the swamp their whole lives, know better than to go deep into those wetlands alone. They know the stories. They know what happened there. They know that 10 men went into the swamp on August 15th, 1863, to hunt a runaway slave named Elijah. Professional hunters, the best in Louisiana. Men who had caught hundreds of runaways before, men who were confident this would be easy money. 7 of them died in 3 days. Killed by traps they never saw coming. Killed by a man they never saw until it was too late. Killed by someone they thought was less than human, someone they thought was property, someone they thought could not possibly outthink or outfight them. 3 men survived and made it out, but they were broken. They never hunted runaway slaves again. They told their story to anyone who would listen, and the story spread like wildfire through the networks of slave catchers and bounty hunters across the South. The message was clear. Slaves were not helpless. They were not stupid. They were not animals. They were people. And some of them would fight back with intelligence and planning and courage that could defeat even the most experienced hunters. That lesson, learned in blood in the Barataria swamp in August 1863, helped change how people thought about slavery. It was not the biggest factor in slavery's end. The Civil War and the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment were the main causes. But stories like Elijah's contributed to a shift in understanding. They proved that the enslaved were fully human, that they could think and plan and execute complex operations. that they deserved freedom not as a gift, but as a right. Elijah never knew how famous his story would become. He spent his last years searching for his family, working odd jobs, living quietly. He never talked much about what happened in the swamp. When people asked, he would just say, "I did what I had to do, that's all." But what he did echoes across the years. His story is told and retold. Each generation learns it and passes it on. And in that telling and retelling, Elijah lives on. The swamp remembers, even if history has mostly forgotten. And on foggy mornings, when the mist rises and the cypress trees cast strange shadows, some people swear they can still feel it. That sense of being watched. That feeling that something is out there in the wetlands. Something that knows every channel and path. Something that is ready to fight if threatened. Maybe it is just imagination. Maybe it is just the natural eeriness of swamps. Or maybe, just maybe, some part of Elijah's spirit remains in that place where he fought and won. Where he transformed from prey to predator. Where he showed the world that he was not property, but a man. The Barataria swamp keeps its secrets well, but those who listen carefully can still hear its lessons.